Cynthia Rogers she's an economics professor at OU.
Could you explain what a TIF is?
Sure. And I think TIFs aren't as complicated as proponents want them to be. So the bottom line is you set up an expensive project that you want to spend tax dollars to fund. And so that's the tax part. The increment part is that where do you get these tax dollars? Well, you draw a little line. We're going to pick an area, and the tax dollars collected in that area, the increment district, will go towards the particular project plan, which may be in a different area or a bigger area. So instead of those tax dollars in this increment district or the TIF district going to fund your police and your fire or your schools, you use it for the project. And that's really the sum of it, is instead of just using, we're going to allocate funds and decide on a big project like roads or bridges, maybe issue bonds and put it up for a public vote. If we create a TIF, we can avoid a public vote. And so this is why developers like it, because you can convince 5 city council members to go along with it without letting the public say, do we want this project? Do we want to spend this much money on the project? So that part is skipped. And when it comes to the Norman Arena TIF, the part of asking the public, do you want to spend $600 million to build a new arena for OU to play in? That part was skipped. This was a plan brought forth by OU Foundation, which owns the land, and they become a land developer. So to me, this is a huge project. It's massive. It should have a public vote. Even if it had universal council support, something this big, bigger than the special purpose sales taxes like Norman Forward, it should have a vote. The public should definitely say whether they want to use scarce public resources for this project or not.
It's called tax increment financing is what the TIF is. So inside the increment, the part that they carve out inside that increment, are you saying that no tax dollars then go to any of the infrastructure in that increment district? It only goes to, or are you taxed twice?
No. So they carve out an increment district where they're going to divert tax dollars. So they'll grab up the taxes generated in that increment district. And the increment means the growth in those tax dollars. So it's the incremental growth. So nothing is happening, and now something happens that there's some taxable activity, and the growth in the taxes could be used to fund the projects. Now, the project could include public infrastructure, but the project could also include building an arena that the public won't own, or, giving incentives or subsidies to private developers. So this growth, which would otherwise go to the city or, the schools, the growth in taxes would be spent, sequestered in a separate fund to be spent only on the project plan. So say the city has a budget crunch and they say, oh, wow, we really need to pay the police and we don't want to furlough folks. They can't touch the money in the TIF fund. That's a no touch 'em fund. So it's sort of pre-authorizing, pre-allocating future tax dollars to this project, no matter what the rest of the world looks like, no matter what the rest of your city budget looks like, which is why developers like it and bankers like it, because they have a designated, pretty guaranteed revenue stream to pay off borrowing. And the real big difference is you don't have a public vote. People like to think that because it's a TIF, it's magic money. It will pay for itself because only the taxes in that district would pay for the project plan. But that misses out on what people are calling displacement. So if you stimulate an area with public funding, build an arena, build something, right? It's got a stimulus effect, but that stimulus effect is in that district. And so now, so for the Norman Arena, now you'll have some new bars and restaurants, and people will go to those bars and restaurants, and their sales tax dollars will go to pay off the project, not for the schools and not for the city to provide services there. So this displacement can be quite large. And if you look at studies about arenas as catalysts, so you'll hear the proponents talk about, oh, it'll be a catalyst. Well, it will be a catalyst for development in the TIF district. It won't be a catalyst for development for the city as a whole. And that's from a public finance, your government paying the bills standpoint. That's the critical question, not can we make something happen on OU's 120 acres? Sure, we could. But will that lead to more tax dollars, more service provision for the rest of the community? Not so much. That's the part. So there's a lot of nuance in the language.
So public money went into creating something that the public can't own. Make that make sense.
Would that I could. We at this point we're not really sure who will own this arena.
Would that I could.
So the county, the city doesn't want to own it. OU Foundation doesn't want to own it. OU, which is supposed to be the anchor tenant, doesn't want to own it. And so they created a county trust that would own it. But Cleveland County is having lots of problems. I don't see how, if it's not good for the city to own and operate it, it somehow is good for the county to do it. Just look at the jail mess. Just look at the sheriff's office mess. I don't see creating a trust, which is unelected people making decisions that impact the community. I don't see, and if the project goes bankrupt, anybody could own it, because the bank could sell the whatever assets are there to anybody. It wouldn't even be in the public hands. So this is really a plan to use public money to pump up the value of privately owned land. In this case, it's OU Foundation. It's a good gig if you can get it. It's wonderful for OU Foundation. It's great for OU Athletics to get a new facility with no commitment. OU is not even a party to the contract at all. This is the anchor tenant that's supposed to be, using the facility the most. They have no contract to use it for even a year or the length of the time. We could be making payments and they could be playing elsewhere. They could have rebuilt a new arena on campus.
So who is actually driving this then? None of this is making any sense when you explain it.
Well, it makes sense if you're OU Foundation and you have 121 acres and you want to make it as valuable as possible to develop and bring in, restaurants, bars, hotels. So that would increase their land value. It makes sense for OU because they get an arena without paying for it. It makes sense for the bankers who will make money lending money. It makes sense for construction people who will construct stuff there. It makes sense for realtors who will be engaged in those transactions. Makes a lot of sense for TIF consultants because, they get paid to help set the deal up and then they get paid to help management the whole time. So there is a whole industry of people that it makes a lot of sense for.
It's another jobs program.
Government jobs program, just City of Norman style. Yeah, basically. Well, I mean, almost everything you've said is almost identical to what the Turnpike Authority scheme is.
Well, it is related because if you look at the proposed exits for the Turnpike and the 24th Ave exit, what does that connect to? The north part of the TIF. It's not a convenience. When did they stop trying to design the entrances and exits to the TIF when the Turnpike stuff came around? So it's intertwined. It really is an overlap of the same sort of cabal of people who are kind of, making money, rent seeking. We call it rent seeking. You make money off of public without necessarily creating value to the public.
Like Kelly, you said that during the OU public meeting, there were a bunch of OU students who came in. What was the story behind that? That was pretty interesting.
Well, a former OU student, an OU alum, who used to work for Norman Economic Development Coalition and now has his own independent consulting firm where he works for the Norman Economic Development Coalition, apparently organized to pay students or incentivize students to come and occupy seats and basically be props at a city meeting. And as much as I would love for citizens to be involved and to participate and show up and see what happens, these guys came, they took up 65 seats from people that come to meetings and were engaged and would have liked to have been comfortably seated in the room. And they weren't paying attention. They had their earbuds on. They were doing their homework. They were doing what young people do. They really were props and placeholders. And I find that, what are we teaching these kids? And then OU president makes a big deal of, look, democracy, these kids are involved, they're our future. But of course, they were paid to be there. So that was all just a big mockery. Did he know? I don't know. It's probably one of those things, don't tell me what I don't want to know.
What can you do to stop this? I mean, you've got at least one county commissioner, Rod Cleveland, out there. Yay, we have this. He's all behind this. So what do you do?
Well, the Local Development Act and the state constitution sets up a process for citizens to have a referendum petition. So if we collect sufficient number of signatures, then we could get it up for a vote of the people. And so that's what is happening. A new nonprofit has been formed called Oklahomans for Responsible Economic Development, ORED. I like the name there. And that is a group that's organizing the petition process. So there are hundreds, 150, maybe 200 people out in the community collecting signatures so we can hit it's like 6,100 signatures. If we get enough signatures and then they have to be verified, and then there will be a lawsuit. We're sure there will be challenges because heaven forbid you let people vote on how to spend their money. So if that would happen, we anticipate there could be a vote as early as February. That would be the next time. But for me, this gives me more of an opportunity to educate people about what it is, what's going on, what are the concerns. And, there are better ways to finance an arena that don't take money from public schools. My estimate is this takes $100 million from public education over the course of this district, diverting the increment. That's a lot of money to take out of public schools. I personally find that offensive to use school money to build an arena. There are other ways to do it. Other SEC communities have built arenas without using 100% TIF, taking all the money in a TIF district. And I think we should explore those. I think we should explore responsible financing plan if the public actually wants to spend money on a new arena. I don't think that's clear that they do. That's why you have a vote.